Welcome to At Your Library. Every month, we come in here to the Cable 10 studios to try to give you just a brief glimpse of some of the multitude of programming that's going on at the Paul Sawyer Public Library. There are so many different things going on that I urge each and every one of you to get down there whenever possible. Pick up the material that they have available at the desk and out in the foyer and find out what programs are going to be coming up. And be sure that you tell them about programs that you would like for them to schedule, because they'll certainly give consideration to that. It's a busy, busy place, and there's always something really fun going on there. Well, one of the things that we find so intriguing about the Paul Sawyer Public Library is the fact that we have local authors. They have worked with us so much and helped us to understand some of the things that are going on in the literary world. And we have two of our favorites right here to talk with you today. We have Chris Helvey and Mike Embry. They have books that they have brought with them so that you can find out about that. But I personally am really interested in finding out how they go about writing those books and why. Also, I'd like for you to know that they've been very active with our Friends group, and they'll be telling you a little bit about that. And in line with that, I want to talk to them a little bit about what happens there at the Friends bookstore right inside the Paul Sawyer Public Library. So let's get started. We don't have a whole lot of time. Mike, you're closest to me.
Okay.
So tell our viewers a little bit about how you've been involved with the Friends of the Paul Sawyer Public Library and what led you into this.
Well, I got involved with the Friends back, 10, 12 years ago. And I was board member, and then they taught me in becoming vice president, and then that led to being the president, and I served that for a couple of years, and put out the newsletter and things like that. I found it just a very rewarding thing to do. I would encourage a lot of people to do that, because to me the library is really kind of the hub of a community, and as you mentioned in your opening, there are just so many things going on at the library. And I think whenever citizens can get involved with the library, it only makes things better. But I enjoyed my time as a member of the board. I kind of moved on to some other things. I'm on the Kentucky Book Fair Committee now.
Yes.
But I'm still a member of the Friends. I'm still a dues-paying member, and those are some really good times for me.
Now, how did you get into the writing as opposed to just reading aspect?
Well, I've always enjoyed writing. I spent more than 30 years in the news media. I worked for a couple of newspapers, a national news service. I was editor of Kentucky Monthly Magazine. So I've always had a love of writing, and that goes back to when I was probably in high school, even before then. That was really my way of communicating. I was kind of a shy kid back then, and I'm a little bit shy still, but it's not as much as I was when I was 10 years old, of course. But writing was a way for me to communicate. And I used to sit there and keep journals, and I would watch games on TV and write up a game story and things like that. And it's just been a way for me to express myself. To me, we all need those kind of outlets, whether you're a painter or a musician. For me, it was writing.
Well, as a reader, I certainly am intrigued with that, and I always enjoy hearing about how people actually got the words on the paper and how they go about doing that. Do you have a particular well, first of all, I'd like for you to hold up that book so our viewers can see what book we're talking about.
Okay. This is the Bully List, and actually this is my 10th book. My first book came out in about 1983, and my first 3 books were sports books, and I wrote a book about the championship teams that colleges produced, from Kentucky, Louisville, and Georgetown, and places like that. And I wrote that book when I was working in New York, and I love basketball, and I knew I was a sports writer, and I knew what Kentucky had produced, but nothing had really been written about it. So I wrote, it was called Basketball in the Bluegrass State. And a couple years after that, when I was at the Lexington Herald, I was the prep sports editor. And I used to keep all these notes, and I had all this information about the high school basketball. So I wrote a book called History of the Kentucky High School Basketball Tournament. It was called March Madness, the main title. And that came out in 1985. And I followed that up a little bit, probably about 13, 14 years later, with a book about Adolph Rupp. And it's basically a quote book, but I did a lot of research on that as well. And I've also written 6 novels. This is my 6th, and a short story collection. So, I keep a lot of information. It's I probably, in another life, I probably would have been a librarian, because I like to store information, reference materials. If you've ever been in my house, you'd see a lot of reference books and things like that. And they're just all through this time, I still like to, I still write. So,
what is the bully list about? Give us kind of an overview. I don't want to spoil it for anybody, because I do want everybody to get a copy and read it, but sort of an overview of what it is.
Well, the bully list is about 2 boys. They're about 14, 15 years old. They're late middle school, about 9th grade or so. And they like to have fun and whatever, but all of a sudden, some boys start picking on them. And it's actually 4 boys. And they continue, and then finally these guys say, listen, we've had enough of this. So they devise a bully list. They're going to get back, a little revenge. And I guess the lesson in this is that sometimes, we all want to get back at people, but sometimes it's good to look to your parents or school authorities and things like that. So I don't want to give away too much of the book, but it's for middle school readers and above. It was written for, I think it's written at a level where maybe some non-readers would read this and really enjoy it. At least I hope so. And readers would like it as well.
Well, it's great to get them young, because it opens up such a big world for them, and it leads them into others. And Chris, I know that you have a little experience with writing for youngsters, but what you have brought with us today is what?
It's a novel whose name I did not know, and it's definitely not a children's story. It's a little bit of I'd say it's a noir piece. It's a story of a former UK athlete who has gotten himself into some hard times, and he runs into his old roommate who is planning a run for the United States Senator. And he hires our protagonist to do one little favor for him. And I won't say too much more than that, but it involves drinking and drugs and trips to Mexico and a whole lot of action.
Yay. And you, our very own local product, have produced this. There are people here in the community that are going to find your name familiar to a certain degree. Tell some of our viewers what it is you do and how you came about to be an author that we're focusing on.
Well, outside of writing, I've been with Kentucky State Government now for, probably more years than we want to talk about 40. I'm with the Kentucky Public Employees Deferred Compensation Authority, and you're right. A lot of people will know me from there. I got into writing, I think Mike's right, you get into writing, but by first being a reader. And I read a lot. My parents read a lot. Grew up in a small town in Missouri, and the library there wasn't too much, but Dad always ordered the Reader's Digest condensed books. And they were a pretty good source of reading back in the 50s and 60s. And I've read all my life, and I got to a point, I guess, and maybe Mike's found the same thing to be true. You read other people and you think, I believe I could do as well as that and maybe a little better. So I started writing a few years ago. Found some success, not all that I wanted, and went to Spalding in their MFA program and learned a lot there, got my MFA in writing, and have since done a couple of books, a couple of novels, book of poetry, and I publish a little old literary journal on the side called Trajectory.
Well, now I was going to ask you about that because getting published is not quite as easy as a lot of us would hope for. It's not an easy task to sit down and put coherent words onto the page and make a story that we think other people would be interested in, but it's even harder to get it actually published. And yet you have taken some steps. You have both accomplished that. But you have taken some steps, Chris, to help others kind of get their words out in front of some people, at least to a small degree. Please tell us about that.
Well, Janet, you're exactly right. You can write a very good story, and that is a challenge in and of itself. But to get it published, you have to submit it, and you have to find the right audience. It has to meet what they want to read. And you can be unlucky or you can be lucky. I had a bit of luck several years ago. One of my first pieces was a nonfiction piece that Kentucky Monthly published, and Mike was kind enough to give me a little opportunity there. But I also won a short story contest over with Modern Mountain Magazine, which is published out of Eastern Kentucky. And that came about because I wrote a story that was vaguely Hemingway-esque in tone, and the writer happened to be the editor happened to be a fan of Hemingway, so it was a good connection. And I've had several short stories published, I don't know, a couple of dozen, several poems published. And I thought that I would just try to do for others what others had done for me. And I wanted to make it a journal that had fiction, some short pieces in it. I wanted it to have some poetry. If I can get some good art, some drawings, black and white or black and white photography, I include those. And I wanted it, there are a number of literary journals out there today. However, Janet, a lot of them are published by universities, which is nothing wrong with that, and it's fine, and they've published a few for me, but a lot of the readers they use on their initial scrub of all the submissions that come in are younger people or students, and they simply see life differently. And so a lot of what I write is perhaps more for a mature audience, so I wanted to give other people, who are above college age, an opportunity to have a friendly ear. And so I've opened this up, and I've got a lot of good submissions, and we've gone through 7 issues so far, and looking forward to publishing number 8 in the spring. But people just submit to me. You advertise and let people know you have this opportunity for them, this journal out there in places like Poets and Writers or Writers Chronicle. And then you get submissions from all over the world. I've met some neat people. There's some real characters out there, and they'll keep on sending you pieces even after you reject them. And they'll send you all kind of stuff. They'll send you drawings and photographs that have really nothing to do with literature, but it's been a good experience, and I think we've published some good work. And you're right, I want to give these people a voice, and you never know who might be looking. And every writer had to start somewhere, and very, very few of us are going to start with a bestseller.
That's right. But yet we have a lot of authors, published authors, and unpublished authors here in this community. Is there something that you think here in the air that makes people want to put words on paper?
Go ahead, Chris.
Well, I think there's certain areas tend to produce literary groups, and Mississippi is one, and Kentucky is another. And I think we have a very vibrant writing community here in Frankfort, with people like Mike, Richard Taylor, a number of others. And in Kentucky, there's a lot of good young writers. I think it's because we have some very strong writing programs at the university, Spalding, Eastern, Murray. I recently have read a very good collection of short stories by a young Kentuckian from Eastern Kentucky, Sheldon Lee Compton, called Same Terrible Storm. I think he does a very good job of portraying, it may be Kentucky, but it could just as easily be West Virginia or Tennessee or southeastern Ohio, the culture that's there today with the poverty and the anger and the drugs. And so I think we kind of feed off each other. And I think that writing groups, at least the writers I've been associated with, not always true, at least based on what I've read. Some places it's very competitive, but here it's been very supportive. Mm-hmm. People like Mike, when he was down at Kentucky Monthly, gave other folks a chance. And I think we like to return those favors.
Well, now, I did talk with Mike briefly about his involvement with the Friends of the Paul Sawyer Public Library, and I know you've had an involvement there.
Well,
too.
I did. Mike asked me to be on the board, and I was for a number of years. I agree. The library is an important part of any community, and it should be an even more important part. And it's tough if you're going to be, it's tough to not be a friend of a great group like that. And so I think the Friends do a very good job of supporting the library, and they give people a great opportunity with the bookstore to come in and buy some really good books at an extremely affordable price. It's quite a collection there, everything from some of the bestsellers and some that perhaps weren't so big on the bestseller list to some all-time classics, and you can pick them up for just a few dollars, and the money always goes for a good cause. So I continue to support the Friends today with my dollars because I like to buy books. I still like to read too.
And I still like to donate books.
Yeah.
Well, every couple of months I'll have a box full of books and take them down there, and it's being recycled, and other people are going to buy them, and it's going to help the library. So it's a win-win situation for everyone.
Well, it is, because the bookstore is pledged to supporting the library. So all of the funding goes to programs for the library, and it really is exciting to me to see each year all of the different programs that they can come up with. We have a major blessing here in this community. We have a wonderful staff down at the library, and anyone who goes down there and asks for any kind of help with the books in there is going to be just amazed at how knowledgeable and how helpful the staff is. So it's a great experience, whether you're a wee tiny little one just getting first started with picture books, or going through any kind of research or reading matter that any of us want here in this community. We really are very fortunate.
Oh, we are. I mean, going to some other communities, some places don't even have libraries, or some have just a small building. Then we have this lovely, just modern building, right downtown with ample parking and 2 stories, and they're going to expand it some more, and just everything a person would want, a reader would want, or a writer would want. It's just, I think it's one of the treasures of Frankfort.
It is, and in a way there's some overlooked treasures there too, folks, because the library has some book clubs. I go to one, Breakfast with a Book. Mark Kennard coordinates that for the library, and you talk about a wide variety of reading material. We've read everything from, Hunter S. Thompson to Ernest Hemingway to John Steinbeck to some books that a lot of people haven't heard of. So it's a great chance to get together and discuss literature. A lot of times readers tend to be solitary, but we all have thoughts about the books we read, and like Mike said, we like to express those thoughts in one way or another. And those book groups are underutilized, and I would encourage anybody to take a look at some of those opportunities.
There are quite a variety of book clubs available here in this community,
There
so
are.
it would be worth making a call down there to inquire about them, because I'm sure that if anyone has a particular interest in a book club that they would like to participate in, there's either one now that they could sit in on, or they could perhaps spark
Start
the
one of their
formation
own.
of one.
Right.
So
You're right.
You're involved with one, aren't you, Mike?
No, not now.
Not at the moment?
Not at the moment, but it's too busy with work and writing and things like that. But I agree with Chris. It's just, I do meet with authors occasionally, and we sit around and talk about books, what we've been reading and things like that. And we talk about the art of writing, and share what we do. But I agree. It's writers. The book groups are great. I know there's a really good mystery readers book club over at the library, and just mentioned, yours has you've been involved with that for how many years now?
Yeah, the Breakfast with a Book has been going on for several years, at least 3 or 4 years now. And there's one that focuses on Kentucky authors. So there's a lot of different ones out there, and you're right, they'd be happy at the library to help you with your own. And there are other reading groups too, and reading groups are really popular across the country, and we have a number of them here in Frankfort.
Well, let me ask you, what are you reading right now, Mike?
Well, I tell you, last night I finished reading a book by Sam Shepard called Paradise Cruising, or Cruising Paradise. It's a bunch of short stories and some nonfiction. And now I'm about halfway through a children's book, The Wind in the Willows, by Kenneth Grahame.
Yeah.
And I was searching the internet. I was on the internet a few weeks ago, and they said this is one book that that you probably should go back and read again. And if I read it back when I was 10 or 12 years old, I don't remember it, but I'm reading it now, and it's just a wonderful book. So
recommendation. There we go, Chris.
I tend to read several books at a time, kind of dip in and out of them, and I have just started on a collection of Truman Capote's short stories. Capote is certainly famous for his lifestyle, and most famous for In Cold Blood, of course, which is not exactly fiction and not exactly nonfiction, kind of a mixture, and perhaps he was the first one to start that, but he's really a beautiful writer, and his collection of stories is very good. I like to read some nonfiction too, and I've just finished one by Studs Terkel. He's an oral historian, and this one was The Good War. I've also read Hard Times by him. The Good War talks about several hundred pages worth of people's experiences during World War II. And I think I tend to go back, and as Mike mentioned, you read some of those out of your childhood, or you read some of those classics again. I've probably read The Sun Also Rises by Ernest Hemingway a dozen times. And another one that I pick up kind of along the line of The Wind in the Willows there would be Treasure Island by Robert Louis Stevenson. It's just one of those it speaks to you, and you go back and you kind of capture a little bit of that boyhood.
Well, that is a good point, because at each stage of our lives, we bring different things to what we're reading, and we find things within that material that relate to us in a different way from when we may have approached it from a different point in our lives. We do hopefully progress from one stage to the next, so there are always new adventures to be had, even if it's with the same material.
even myself, it's a book I wrote a couple of years ago before this. It's called Shooting Star. And it's kind of the old Chip Hilton type books, if you remember those back from the 50s, written by Clara B. Kind of inspirational kind of books, how the kid overcomes obstacles, and, he's, crowned a champion of some sort, and those kind of books. I'll go back and read those things, and I said, I want to write something like that as well, too, to give kids an optimistic outlook that you can overcome things, if you work hard and things like that. So
I think it's so interesting, Mike, you mentioned the Chip Hilton books, because I think those books, and I read all of them, probably influenced a generation of American, at least boys. I think probably boys primarily read those. But they were very wholesome, sports-oriented books, and Chip Hilton was a character in these books. And I think it's great to go back. I still have a couple of those from when my dad bought them all those years ago, when Clara B. was a coach at Long Island University, who also wrote books, and he followed this character, Chip Hilton, who was the star, and he had buddies like Speed Morris and Soapy Smith and Red Schwartz, and they followed him from high school through college, and they covered basketball and football and baseball. So it was a great series. I think it's important for us all to have some books we read in common, so that we can have a kind of a common dialogue in America. And we're not just talking about, what the Kardashians are doing, but we're talking about what some of the really important literary figures in America are doing today.
And if that is piquing your interest,